And we are live with today's 220. No, it's the N10-008. This is the Network Plus study group today. We are in our pre-show right now, so we are working on getting everything together, making sure that we've got streaming working. It looks really good. We've got recordings going. You see my Cylons down here between all the cables I've got strung across. Let's make a little bit of room, shall we? We've got everything else kind of ready. All our cameras look good. Laptop's not up. Let's get that running. There it is. Oh, okay. There you go. We're good. Hey, chat room. Hey, everybody. Hope everybody is well. We are just a few minutes away from getting started. 9 minutes away from getting started with today's live stream. Hope everyone is doing okay. Folks are checking in from all over. I guess I could put up the picture where you're joining from. Let's do that. So now you can see where you might be joining from. You can put your digital pin in the map from wherever you happen to be. People are checking in the chat room. Some folks in the Florida Keys checking in from, you didn't say where in the Florida Keys, but which mile marker, which location. Florida Keys, it's pretty long. It could be many different places. We've got Canada is here. Folks, hey, Malks checking in from St. Vincent. As usual, thank you for being here again and putting up with me. There's plenty to put up with. New York is here. New Jersey is here. We got Mississippi, Stock Island, Massachusetts, Colorado Springs, Turkey is here. We got Virginia, Dayton, New Jersey, Clearwater, Florida. More Floridians checking in. Good to have you here. Welcome aboard. All of us are hanging out here. It's a beautiful day in Florida today. If you aren't here, you should be. Maybe you shouldn't be. I don't know. I'm a little torn. We got folks checking in from Rocky Mount, North Carolina, Western Washington, which is different than Eastern. Very different. We got Arkansas and South Africa and Australia and Indianapolis, Maple Grove, Minnesota. We got lots of folks checking in. Thank you for being here. We are doing all questions in this first hour from the N10-008, the Network Plus. Let's see, did I update my Network Plus content here? I don't know if I did or not. Probably didn't, because there was some new content, some new updates to the Network Plus content. I'm gonna have to switch over and look that up real quick because I'm interested in knowing if I got my dates right. And I want to be sure I give you the latest in dates and times and all of those things. So let's check the latest on the calendar, which is what I'm doing now. You just can't see it because I'm doing it on this side, but I have access to the sort of the back end partner calendar on the CompTIA site. So I want to see what they say the latest is for Network Plus. Yeah, it's about right. Exam retirement is probably about right somewhere in there. So I'm going to leave it where it is. In fact, it's exactly right. I must have updated it. I'm so happy for that version. Let's see. Q4. Yep, that's right. And it's probably going to be about the same as the other. I think we're in pretty good shape. Certification launch. Yeah, we're all right. Because we're now in March. Can you believe it? I cannot. I don't know what's going on. All right, back to the chat room. Where is everybody? We are in good shape. Is it recommended to get A+ and Network Plus before Security Plus? Been told the A+ and Network Plus aren't needed for a career in cybersecurity. Who needs computers and networking to be able to protect computers and networks? Doesn't make much sense when I say it like that, does it? You do need to know operating systems. You do need to know servers. You do need to know networking before you can even imagine the idea of getting into cybersecurity. We'll say IT security. Cybersecurity is just a word that doesn't mean anything. So I'll be more specific when you do that. We'll put the link up, sure, if you need to get to the Q&A and put your digital push pin in our map. That would be a good time to do it right now. We got about 5 minutes to go before we get started. So this will be pretty good. Do I offer CISA Plus training videos? None at the moment. CISA Plus is on our list, but it's a big list. Got to tell you, it's a large list. So currently, no CISA Plus planned in the near future. So at least maybe give you an idea. There you go. I was donated some older Cisco switches circa 2009. Well, you weren't donated that. Somebody gave it to you to throw away for them, I think is what happened. Would they still be viable in helping me lab? Absolutely. If you're getting a Cisco certification from 2009, they will be incredibly useful. So that's not going to help you very much. And I think probably for the latest, I'm assuming you mean labbing for Cisco, because you do not need Cisco switches or any switches to do any labbing for Network Plus. That's well outside the scope of the exam. But some people like to play around with them. I think it would be better for you to use at this point, instead of using hardware from 2009, I would recommend that you use Cisco's packet tracer utility. So that I think is a better approach to this. It's a good one to focus on. So folks in the chat room, or at least one person in the chat room says it's so laggy. Well, the video you're getting from YouTube comes directly from YouTube. So that's between you and YouTube to figure out why there's a lag there. I'm sending, and you can see this 3% here, that straight line across here. That means I'm sending a consistent stream of data to the YouTube side. So I'm not seeing any lagging on this side. Everything looks great. So if there is lagging, you might want to click the cog wheel, that gear wheel that's at the bottom of the screen, and change your resolution perhaps to a less intense amount. Go to, I guess we're sending it out at 1080p. You might want to use 720. You might want to use something else to figure those pieces out. So that might help you, because I have a feeling if you're seeing lagging, I have a feeling it's on your side until we see some other evidence that states that it is not. So we'll figure it out. We'll get to 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes. We'll get things started here. Thank you, YouTube, for telling me everything is okay. How is that mouse? That mouse is amazing. Have you ever seen this mouse? This is it's a Hippus mouse, right? Is that the company that makes it? It is. The Hippus hand shoe mouse. It's enormous. I mean, your whole hand fits on the mouse. It's difficult to tell with the scope that you're seeing on the camera. Let me see if I can pick it up. I'll pull this a little bit further. So this is the mouse. You really can't tell the scope there, but my whole hand fits on the mouse. Like, that's how big. It's designed for your whole hand to sit on top of. And you can see it sits there ergonomically. So your fingers don't come off the sides. The thumb doesn't come off the sides. It sits on a little platform. Isn't that crazy? I know it's out of focus, but that's just because of the type of lens I'm using. So my whole hand sits on the mouse. So it's incredibly comfortable. So comfortable to use. Now, if you are using or want to do something where you need to move the mouse fast, if you need to use like a gaming scenario, this is not the mouse for you, because the larger mouse, there's more mass and it takes longer to move it around. It becomes a little bit of a challenge to do that. Besides packet tracers, GNS3, a good simulator to do lab tasks. Again, both of these well outside the scope of Network Plus. Do not use either one of those to lab anything associated with Network Plus. But if you're studying for Cisco, packet tracer is good. GNS3 is incredibly complicated to get set up relative to everything else. And you still need to have code. You need software, which sort of a weird thing is that you don't have the software. You need something to emulate a Cisco environment that you don't have, but GNS3 requires you to have a Cisco device so that you have software that you could run. So there you go. And then, yeah, you can go up to EVE-NG, which works pretty well too. But again, that's well outside the scope and way too much for the things that we're going to be doing today. So don't worry so much about that. Let's see. We're about at the top of the hour. Let's do a final check of our screens, of our things, of the stuff we got here. Everything looks pretty good. At this point, it's about time to get things started because, as you can see, top of the hour, 12 o'clock noon. Let's do a live stream, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 2024 N10-008. That is the Network Plus study group coming to you live from Messer Studios. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the Network Plus exam objectives, and you'll be able to answer them live and online if you're here watching with us. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone who's watching live. And if you're watching on the replay, thank you so much for joining us as well. There will be plenty for us to go through, whether you are here live or waiting to look for the replays that we're going to be doing. There's a lot going on our website, on our YouTube channels, and so many other things. So I want to be sure that you're able to find all of those. In the meantime, let me tell you how you can participate. We'd love to have you join us if you are here live. Simply go to the professormesser.com/QA option. That is the URL. Pop open a new browser window, and you can find that particular link waiting for you. That'll give you some information that you can use. It will show you, in fact, a question right now that you'll be able to answer. This will be a good test for you. The question that will be waiting for you is this question that asks, which of the following would be categorized as a link state routing protocol? Now, link state routing protocols are something you should be familiar with. It is part of the CompTIA exam objectives. There are, though, different options to choose from if you follow that link on the screen, professormesser.com/QA. Our standing rule in the chat room is no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. You want to use this that says, which of the following would be categorized as a link state routing protocol? Is that EIGRP, QoS, RIP, OSPF, or BGP? All of these are real things, by the way. I didn't make any of these up. They're legitimate. If you think you know the answer, go to the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and you can lock in that answer to see if you happen to know what this one is. I think a lot of you might know this one. This is a rewind question because it is a question that came from our study group last month. So this will be a good test to see how well you remember some of that content. We'll have to see if you can do that. Now, in the meantime, we will come back to this question in just a moment. We'll figure out what the right answer happens to be. But in the meantime, let me remind you that we've got a lot going on the website, and there are certainly things happening with Network Plus right now. We'll talk about that. The way that you keep track of all of the latest videos that we have is to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to professormesser.com/YouTube. You can also click the bell there, and it's a great way to go through the process of deciding how you might be notified if a new video is posted. Also, we have weekly Network Plus pop quiz questions. Go to professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/Instagram. Yeah, I'm still calling it Twitter. It's one of those things. As soon as everyone else stops saying X, the service formerly known as Twitter, I think we'll be in better shape there. I'll figure it out eventually. I promise you. There's also, of course, content that we need to talk about regarding Network Plus. The current Network Plus exam version is the the N10-008. I need to look at my own screen here. There it is, the N10-008. This was an exam that was released on September 15th, 2021. We've also got a retirement planned for this certification. Right now, it's looking somewhere around Q4 of this year. So if you are working on your Network Plus right now, now is the time to keep working on that Network Plus. We would imagine that it usually takes about 3 months on average to go through everything associated with that. So that's what I would recommend you do as well. Go to and have a look at those dates. I think if you're planning to get your exam done by December, you're just fine. You are in the right place doing the right thing. As we get closer to that December timeframe, we will need to make decisions about what version of the Network Plus we would like to use. Right now, this is the only version of the Network Plus available. We expect that in the coming months that we might see a new release of the Network Plus exam. And at that time, you'll get to decide whether you want to take a new exam or an old exam. There's a big decision to make at that point, but we'll address that when that finally appears. We may be months away from even seeing that. And as I always tell people, don't worry so much about looking at exam information and when it might come and what the differences in dates might be. And don't worry about those changes. What you need to focus on right now is passing your Network Plus. Having that in your pocket is much more important than worrying about what dates an exam might be available later this year. So get that certification, get it in your pocket. The exam itself is 90 minutes long. You could get a maximum of 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90 questions. And the exam itself is on a scale from 100 to 900, and you need to earn a 720. We've also got multiple choice and performance-based questions, both of which we will do today. Also let you know that all of our Network Plus videos are available for you to watch for free on our website and on our YouTube channel. We've also got more information there. You'll learn more about the other things that we offer on our website, such as offline versions of those videos, audio-only versions of the course. We have course notes and other materials that can help you as well. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can find it on our website at professormesser.com/netsuccess. I also have a video replay of this live stream available immediately after this event is over. I click the stop button and it just automatically gets posted to the website. The other thing that you might want to look at is an audio replay version of this live stream. If you're in the car or you're working out, you can't really watch a screen, you might want to use the audio version. You can add that to your podcast listening program by visiting the link on your screen, professormesser.com/podcast. Also, about a day or so after this event, you'll also notice in our YouTube video description that suddenly, almost like magic, there will be a list of timestamps that will be there, and you can click on the timestamp to go directly to a question and answer or something that someone may have asked in our after show. These don't happen automatically. They happen because my marketing manager, Lori, has to listen to this whole thing and put all of these timestamps in there. Hey, Lori, she's watching this, of course, probably at 2x speed and deciding where those different stopping points might be and adding them to the YouTube video description. So thank you, Lori. Folks in the chat room have already mentioned how much they appreciate those. So we appreciate everything you're doing there as well. We've also got our chat available when we're not doing this live stream. You can find us over on Discord. We have our own Discord server. You can find it at professormesser.com/Discord. We've also got invitations available on our website. If you don't want to type all of that in, there are icons in the top right of our website. Click that Discord icon and you can join our Discord server there as well. Also let you know, eventually you're going to need to take this Network Plus exam. And if you are in the US or Canada, you might want to visit my website, because instead of going to the CompTIA site and paying full price for your voucher, you can come to my website and get a discounted price for your voucher. You don't have to use a particular coupon code. There's nothing special that you have to have in your browser to see the discount. Just simply visit professormesser.com/vouchers and you can find that every voucher there has already been discounted. Nothing extra that you would have to do. Unfortunately, for the rest of the world, these vouchers are only available for folks that are physically located in the US, Canada, or a US territory. Unfortunately, I don't offer vouchers for other countries at the moment. If you do purchase the voucher from my website, you also get a free copy of my ebook. My Exam Hacks ebook is a list of all the tips and tricks that I've accumulated for taking these exams through the years, something that might help you when you're in the middle of your exam, perhaps get a few extra points. And that's something that you get for free if you go to professormesser.com/vouchers and purchase your voucher there. Let's now go to that question I asked earlier, which is, which of the following would be categorized as a link state routing protocol? Is that EIGRP, QoS, RIP, OSPF, or BGP? And let's find out what you answered. And we'll stop our poll, and we can see that 55% of you say the answer is OSPF. And then we have a good setting, a good distribution of the others. 13% say EIGRP, 14% say RIP, 9% say BGP, and then you've got QoS at 7%. QoS, obviously not a routing protocol, so I'm surprised 7% is kind of high for something that turns out not actually a routing protocol. So what would this link state routing protocol be then? Link state routing protocols are effectively routing protocols that check to see if the link is there. And if the link is there, it will traverse that link. If the link isn't there, it will remove that particular route from the routing tables. Link state routing protocols may also consider how fast the link might be, which is especially helpful if there are redundant links and one is slower than the other. We'll always use the faster link if you're using that type of link state protocol. This is a very scalable method of doing automatic route distribution. It's dynamic routing, which means the routers figure out where the routes are and communicate to all of the other routers. And that way you don't have to do anything on your side. There's nothing that you have to worry about. One of the most popular link state routing protocols used very often inside of large enterprises is the Open Shortest Path First, or OSPF. That is the link state routing protocol that we were looking for. And in fact, 55% of you already knew this. It's OSPF. That is the answer we were looking for. EIGRP, RIP, and BGP are not link state routing protocols. QoS is quality of service. It's not a routing protocol at all, so that would not be the right answer. The only one on this list that would qualify as link state routing is indeed OSPF, and that's another routing protocol that's important to know for your exam. So hopefully you did very well on that one. I think a number of you remember that one from last month. That can certainly help you on these rewind questions that we do from the very beginning. But let's do a new question. Let's do one that you have not seen before. We refer to these as our performance-based question of the month, because I always like to give you a question at the beginning of your exam, or something that would simulate the questions you get at the beginning of your exam. Many people don't realize that at the beginning of their Network Plus exam, they get a handful of questions that are not multiple choice. The question we just had, of course, was a multiple choice question where there was a question and then multiple options to choose from. Well, the beginning of your exam will be questions that are anything but multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. It might put you at a command prompt and ask you to perform a command or function. Maybe it's a matching question. You may have to put things in a particular order. It might be drag and drop on the screen. There could be a number of different ways, but all of the questions they ask for performance-based questions come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. So this is a good time to step through and understand what different options might be. So I have for you today a performance-based question, and we're going to look at this one now. This is one I get to really go through and talk to, because this is a class question. IP classes is our question today. And the question asks, what classes are associated with these IP addresses? This is obviously we don't do subnetting based on classes today, but it is a starting point when you begin the subnetting process. So it may still be very important and useful to know what these IP address classes might be. There are 5 addresses here. I want you to tell me, it's a fill in the blank question, and tell me what classes these are. The first IP address is 220.10.7.240. The next one is 230.10.220.7. The next is 18.16.177.192. The fourth one on this list is 137.7.14.99. And the last one is 191.167.19.18. You can see now why I was not really sure about wanting to do a question with a bunch of numbers in it, but I think we did okay. So I want you to tell me what classes would be associated with each individual IP address. Maybe all of them are the same class. Maybe some of these are sharing the same class. We need to know what this performance-based question is really asking of us. Again, what classes are associated with these IP addresses? We have 220.10.7.240, 230.10.220.7, 18.16.177.192, 137.7.14.99, and 191.167.19.18. If you think you know the answer, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. I'm going to sneak over and have a look. Yep, people are locking in their answers now. I want you to go through and see if you know what particular IP addresses these might correlate to, what different classes these IP addresses might correlate to. See if you can put them in there. This is one you should be able to do relatively quickly. There's not really any math involved on this one. We always get concerned during subnetting that people are getting into this and The math is the problem. But I think in this particular question, don't have to worry so much about the math. We're just at the very beginnings of the subnetting process with this particular question. Lock in your answer by visiting the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. It's that link right there at the bottom. Now, if you're watching this on the replay, obviously that QA link is not going to be live. You won't see anything there unless you happen to stumble into a live event where we are using that. This is the link you want to go to answer this particular question if you are here watching it live. And if you're not watching it live, just make a note. Pop open a new window, pop open a notepad, pop open anything on your screen, and make a note of what you think the answers might be. And when we go through it, you'll be able to cross-reference and see if you got this one right. Let's see how you did. Let's step through each one of these and see if we know what classes are associated with these IP addresses. I'm going to put on the screen a chart. There it is. This chart tells you the different classes, what the different leading bits of this might be. And you can see that if the address starts with binary 0, it's a class A address. If this address starts with binary 10, it's a class B address. If it starts with binary 110, and so on. You can start to see where those differences are. Now, we don't generally think in binary as humans. So one of the things that is right after that is we have taken that leading bits in binary and converted that to decimal. This means that if we look at the first octet or the first number of that IPv4 address, and it is in the range between 1 and 127, then this is a Class A address. If the first number is between 128 and 191, it's Class B. If it is between 192 and 223, it is a Class C. If it's between 224 and 239, a Class D. And if it's between 240 and 254, it's a Class E. It's really that simple. You're now doing a simple lookup table to determine what class this might be. So as we're looking, let's start with the first one on our list. We have 220.10.7.240. Only thing you have to look at is the first number. You don't have to look at any of the other 3 octets. That first octet is 220. So now we can go back to our chart here and look for 220. Where does 220 fit? 220 is certainly between 192 and 223. That means that this particular address must be a Class C address. That's a pretty good one to go with. Let's do another one. Next on our list is 230.10.220.7. Again, we can disregard any of those last 3 octets and focus on the first number, 230. And we can go back to our chart and we can see that 230 falls in the range between 224 and 239, which means this is a multicast address. Class D is what that address would be. So you can see once you know the chart or once you know how to calculate the binary differences between those particular classes, or maybe just memorize the chart, it can be very easy to figure out what that class might be. Next on our list is 18.16.177.192. If we look at the 18, we can see that it clearly fits in the range between 1 and 127. That is Class A. Next on our list is 137.7.14.99. That 137 is the number we want. 137 fits in that range of 128 and 191. Fits right in the middle, and so that would be a Class B address. And then lastly, 191.167.19.18. If we look on our list, Class B address also is associated with the range between 128 and 191. That means it fits as a Class B as well. So there's our answer. We have 220.10.7.240 is a Class C address. 230.10.220.7 is a Class D address. 18.16.177.192 is a Class A address. 137.7.14.99 is a Class B address, and 191.167.19.18 is a Class B address. It's very interesting when you start going through this and understanding how to determine what the class is. Everything kind of falls into place pretty quickly. You have a lot of numbers on the screen. It can be almost intimidating, but when you realize we could ignore everything but the first number, this becomes relatively easy to step through. Maybe this is one that you found very simple to go through. This was a very good example of a performance-based question. Happened to be a fill in the blank. You could get a question like this on your exam, and you should certainly be familiar with classes and how it relates to IP version 4. Hopefully you did very well on that. Let's now do another question, but I want to do a multiple choice based question. So we're reverting back to the rest of this exam. And we should go through this next question that asks, which of the following would commonly be monitored using NetFlow? Would that be the total size of executable files, the CPU utilization by device, a list of machines with a device certificate, the available drive space on all servers, or a percentage of traffic by user? A lot to pour through there, a lot to parse out. The question again asks, which of the following would commonly be monitored using NetFlow? Is that the total size of executable files, CPU utilization by device, list of machines with a device certificate, available drive space on all servers, or the percentage of traffic by user? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your question. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We're going to always go to professormesser.com/QA. See how we do. Next on, this is a question that is really focusing on NetFlow. These are the things that we need to know about when dealing with the network. So I don't want to go into much more detail about it. I don't want to give anything away, but we're trying to figure out what we would be monitoring specifically using NetFlow. So make sure you narrow your focus to only NetFlow. And there's quite a bit to consider there. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, which of the following would commonly be monitored using NetFlow? Would this be the total size of executable files, the CPU utilization by device, a list of machines with a device certificate, available drive space on all servers, or a percentage of traffic by user? And what did you choose? Let's find out. We're locking the poll, and we can see that 91% of you, I was not expecting such a large number, say the answer is a percentage of traffic by user for NetFlow. This is one of those where it's so high, did we all get it right, or did we all get it wrong? We do have 6% of folks that say CPU utilization by device. We have less than 1% or 8% say available drive space on all servers. A total size of executable files is less than 1%, and 0% of a list of machines with a device certificate. NetFlow, of course, is a way to monitor traffic on the network. It's literally flows of traffic that we would want to monitor. NetFlow is a standard way of doing this. You imagine if every device that you needed to gather statistics from and information from had a different way of gathering those details. It's one of the nice things about having SNMP and NetFlow and SFlow and a lot of the other monitoring systems that we use is that it's very, very standardized so that we can use one single NetFlow console and effectively talk to anything that is NetFlow compliant. Normally, there is a collector that is the central management server that handles going out and grabbing this information from all those devices. The devices themselves are running an agent or software on that device that are compiling these statistics for the individual device. Those we would call probes. Even if it is a firewall, even if it's a router or switch or a server that has a NetFlow capability, we still refer to the software compiling that NetFlow information as a NetFlow probe, even though it may not be a standalone appliance, which some of us are very familiar with on the NetFlow side. So I think we can say here that when we start looking at NetFlow, we want to be able to understand flows of traffic over the network. A flow of traffic is when one user or one device is talking to another user or another device. This is the normal conversation we would have on the network. The vast majority of conversations on the network are between one device and another with a direct unicast, unidirectional in both directions between two devices. There's also, of course, broadcasts. We can, of course, see those. And multicast, of course, is very popular in a number of different networks. But you can start to see the breakdown here, conversations on the network. That's tells us how much information has been transferred between one device and another. We can also get a breakdown by user. This shows us the top 10 endpoints. This would show us the percentage of traffic by user. This is by IP address, in some cases, the domain name itself. And you can see a breakdown of ingress and egress information. So we know how much information the device has sent and how much information that device has received. Well, that is exactly what 91% of you chose, was a percentage of traffic by user. That is exactly what we would see with NetFlow from our NetFlow console, and that would be the right answer. I think we pretty much knew that when we saw 91% of you straight through whatever it was. Now, one of the interesting things about NetFlow is that it is based on SNMP. The underlying communication that often takes place with NetFlow is an SNMP communication. That's really what's happening over the network. NetFlow is effectively a standardized MIB for SNMP. A MIB is a management information base. What that really is a database of information that is collected for that particular feature. In this case, NetFlow is the feature. So there's a MIB for Windows servers. There's a different MIB for Cisco routers. There's another MIB for Palo Alto Networks firewalls. So every device has its own little database. But NetFlow is a database that multiple devices can share. And that way, when you bring all of that information back, it is all standardized and you can really do a nice correlation across all of those. This is exactly what we would use. Now, although SNMP is being used here, this question was specifically about NetFlow. So CPU utilization by device would be a very common statistic to gather using SNMP. Commonly, SNMP MIB2 would be a good MIB to use for that. But we weren't talking about SNMP MIB2. We were talking about NetFlow. NetFlow doesn't generally gather information at the CPU utilization level. It also does not gather available drive space on servers. That's another great statistic to gather with SNMP. But again, we're talking about NetFlow specifically, not just SNMP globally. Total size of executable files is not really gathered with SNMP or NetFlow. That's something you would have to go to the operating system to gather. A list of machines with a specific device certificate or with any type of device certificate would be there. In this case, finding that list of machines, that's another thing we would need to query the operating system for. And then we already gone through executable files, utilization, and drive space. So in this case, the 91% of you that said percentage of traffic by user, you got that one absolutely right. That would be the common monitoring with NetFlow given these 5 different options. So hopefully that's something that many of you already know. And those of you that didn't get this one, now you know it for your exam. Let's do another question. I've got one for you. This one asks, before a user can connect to a wireless network, they must provide their username and password. Which of the following would best describe this process? Would this be SSO, multi-factor authentication, 802.1x, secure SNMP, or clientless VPN? Number of options to choose from. The question again asks, before a user can connect to a wireless network, they must first provide their username and password. Which of the following would best describe this process? Is that SSO, multi-factor authentication, 802.1x, secure SNMP, or clientless VPN? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Let's see. Some of you were asking earlier what application was running on that NetFlow app. Let me see if I can pull that up for you. I'm going to disrupt everything. That is from a product called Orion from what used to be, or still is, I guess, the folks over at SolarWinds. SolarWinds, of course, had those security issues. Was it last year, the year before? It's kind of bad. So SolarWinds was where that came from, which at the time, I'm not sure how popular it continues to be, but an incredibly useful NetFlow app to have that there. There's so many different NetFlow applications out there to choose from, though. You just figure out what the right answer might be with these. Hopefully something you can work through. Yeah, it did have that SolarWinds look to it, didn't it? That's where that came from. We got a lot to go through here. Go lock in your question. You can find it at professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Hopefully this will give you an idea of what to go through next on your list. See if you know what this one is. This should be one that you should be able to lock in on. Some of you probably already done this. You probably go to work, you get on the wireless network, and it prompts you for a username and password. You may not even realize what's happening behind the scenes And if you don't know what's happening behind the scenes, we're about to find out. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, before a user can connect to a wireless network, they must provide their username and password. Which of the following would best describe this process? Is it SSO, multi-factor authentication, 802.1x, secure SNMP, or clientless VPN? And we'll close the poll, and we can see 52% of you say the answer is 802.1x, but 30% of you say it's SSO. 10% of you say it's multi-factor authentication. Only 3% say secure SNMP, and only 3% say clientless VPN. If we go with the majority here of 52%, then we would go with 802.1x. That is a standard from the IEEE that we often don't call 802.1x. You may see it written on the screen or part of the configuration options when you're logging in, but we often just refer to it as NAC. We have things that we can do here with port-based network access control, and network access control is one that requires some type of authentication before you get to the network. And in the world of network authentication and network access control, there are many things that can happen after that. It might assign you to a particular VLAN based on your login. It might change you to a different configuration on the switch. It might assign you different quality of service depending on what group you happen to belong to. But most of the time, people are focusing on the authentication part of network access control. And that's what we get here is you have to put in a username and password, and you have this process that the system goes through that you can't even communicate on the network until you provide the correct authentication. So this is exactly where you should be focusing if you're concerned about people walking into a conference room and plugging in and being on your network. Why not enable 802.1x? Then they plug into that link in the conference room, and the first thing that pops up is a message that says you must authenticate with your username and password to gain access to this network. Put your credentials in. So that is a great way to prevent third parties or unauthorized individuals from gaining access to the network. And that is network access control, which is also called 802.1x. That's X with an uppercase X. There's a whole story we can do about that one too. Now, 30% or so of you said the answer is SSO. That, of course, stands for single sign-on. This is a very common process on many networks where you log in at the beginning of the day, and then anytime you need to access a resource, it remembers who you are using a very complex series of cryptography and tickets that it uses. Commonly, we're doing things like using Microsoft Windows to do this, which behind the scenes uses the Kerberos protocol. But single sign-on is a very involved process, and it has specific protocols that must be used to enable it. Simply authenticating using a username and password doesn't mean necessarily that any type of single sign-on might be going on. In fact, I logged in this morning to Google Mail and I used a username and password. But then I went to another website and I had to put my username and password in again. Well, just putting in a username and password doesn't imply single sign-on. So although it could have single sign-on behind the scenes, that's not a guarantee. And given the other options on the screen, it would not be the best description of this particular process because there may be no single sign-on happening here whatsoever. Similar with multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication means that we're using multiple factors to log in, such as something we know, something we are, somewhere we are. There are a number of different criteria that we can pull from. And if you've ever logged in with a username, a password, and then you had to put in a code that was sent to you via a text message, or you have an app on your phone that presents to you a special code you have to put in, that is an additional authentication factor. The password is something we know. The special code that's on our phone is something we have because it's on our phone. We have to have our phone to be able to gather that particular code. So in this case, we're only putting in a username and password that is a single factor authentication. So it would not be multi-factor or two-factor or any other multiple factors of authentication. Secure SNMP implies that we are doing the simple network management protocol. We just talked about SNMP in that last question that we had. The secure version of SNMP uses encryption, very commonly SNMP v3, to make that happen. And a clientless VPN is when you're able to use a virtual private network, connect to another remote network over a secure channel, And you don't have to load any software on your computer. It all runs as HTML5. You don't have to install, maintain, update, or do anything special on your computer. It simply loads that software into your browser as you're using it. So clientless VPN, although great capability, pretty nifty, but not what we were looking for when we were connecting to a wireless network and using a username and password. We're simply trying to get authentication to this network. In this case, the best description of this, given these 5 options, is indeed the one marked 802.1x, and 52% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Now, as you've already seen, there are so many different acronyms, technologies, network configurations, security, and other options you have to know for this exam. And if you look at my course, it's 93 videos to be able to get through all of them. And it consists of over 14 hours of content. And although I highly recommend you watch every video and go through all 14 hours, not everybody has the time to do that. Or maybe you feel that certain topics you know pretty well already, but you might want a refresher. So you might want to consider getting my Network Plus course notes. The course notes are designed to get everything from my videos into one single place. That makes it very easy if you're someone who's trying to find information that's in a particular video, or you just want everything summarized for you in one single view. We have these course notes available in a physical format. So here is the book of the course notes, but I've also got course notes available in a digital format as well. Here's the digital format. These course notes are available, 74 pages of them, and they have all of the text, all of those graphics and images from the videos themselves, and any charts or information that you might need is also listed in the course notes. Everything that you need to know from the exam objectives is summarized in the course notes. Now, this obviously is not something that you would use to replace any of your video watching. It's not used to replace reading a book or going through your labs, but it is a great way to have everything summarized for you in one place. If you want to learn more about those, go to professormesser.com/NPCN for the Network Plus course notes, or you can simply find it in the pull-down menus at the top of the Professor Messer website. It's also a great way to support what we do here. Have a look at those course notes and see if it's something that might help you with your studies. Let's do some more questions. I've got more on this list. Next on our list is this question. It's a Linux question, or at least a Linux administrator question that asks, a Linux administrator needs to view the Ethernet adapter address settings on a database server. Which of the following would provide this information? Would that be IP, netstat, route, ping, or nmap? Got 5 options to choose from. The question again asks, a Linux administrator needs to view the Ethernet adapter address settings on a database server. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be IP, netstat, route, ping, or nmap? Do you think you know the answer? Follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. And it is true. There are a number of you, I think, in the chat room who are already thinking, I would use, wait, it's not on the list. So this is a very common thing in Linux, of course. There are many ways to perform a single task in Linux. And anytime you perform a task, someone in Linux is very happy to tell you about the other 3 or 4 ways to do this, at which time someone else will step in and give you another 3 or 4 ways to do it. That's the great thing about Linux, is we have this community of people that can give you different ideas of how to do that, whether you're interested in hearing about it or not. That's just how we work in Linux. We like to tell everybody. So hopefully you know what all 5 of these commands are. They are commands from Linux. So hopefully you're familiar with these different commands and what you would use to be able to provide this information. And I really tried to give you options that would focus in on one single answer. So don't try to Linux me into something else. Don't give me one of those other 7 or 8 ways to do it. I want the one that's on this list. Hopefully this can help you with that. I think whenever we start going through all of these different options in Linux, you're going to find that there are different ways to do this. And in fact, we can have a fight and decide which one makes most sense for what we are doing. But I think there's one here that is very, very, very obvious to be able to do this. In fact, for those of you in the chat room even said Mac OS. Yeah, I guess we could have said a Mac OS administrator because it's the same commands on the Mac OS side to be able to do that. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, a Linux administrator needs to view the Ethernet adapter address settings on a database server. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be IP, netstat, route, ping, or nmap? And let's see what you chose on this list. We'll lock in our answers, and we're a little torn on this one. We have 36% of us that say the answer is IP. We have 31% of us that say netstat, 26% say nmap, and then with 2.9% apiece, we have route and ping. Well, whenever we're trying to get Ethernet adapter address settings, if you're talking about the Ethernet adapter, we're talking about a MAC address. And I guess we could be talking about IP addresses as well, but I would have said an IP address in this case. When we want an Ethernet adapter address, we're talking about a layer 2 address or a MAC address. That is the media access control address, not Apple Macintosh. So MAC is an important address to know what you would choose from. And so you may want to look at details of the configuration for both layer 2 and layer 3 on this device. And if you're on Linux, you'll probably be using one of many different types of commands. You could use ipconfig if you're on one type of operating system, or ifconfig and IP if you're on Linux and Mac OS. So you've got options here to be able to do troubleshooting. And usually if you're trying to figure out what a MAC address might be, an IP address might be, and really understanding what these are that we would be using, we would need to really go down to the operating system level. For example, on Windows, we would use ipconfig to be able to see the MAC address and IP address configuration for that device. If you're in Linux or Mac OS, you're probably using ifconfig or IP. IP space address is the full command if you want to be able to see the Linux information in Linux. But IP is it's a newer style command. The idea of being able to use ifconfig is being deprecated in newer versions of Linux, and we tend to use IP as the more modern version of that particular command. So IP is what we were looking for. And in fact, 36% of you said I would choose IP as the answer as well. That is the one we were looking for. Netstat gives us information about data that's going in and out of our system. It can tell us what device we have on IP addresses are on our device and what IP addresses we're talking to on a remote device, but it really focuses on IP addresses. There's probably and most likely, in fact, I can certainly think of some netstat commands that could provide you with some information about the Ethernet adapter, but that's not what we were asking about. We wanted the most applicable command here. The IP command is just spot on. We don't have to figure out where that information might be in a much larger output of data. We're really focusing on tell me what the config is, and it shows you the config. That's the IP command. Netstat might get there, but you'd have to go through a number of different iterations or perhaps even different areas of the screen to collect all of that data. That's not what we wanted to do. So that would not be a very useful command. In fact, it'd be very difficult to hone in on exactly what you were looking for by using the netstat command. Nmap is a great utility. It's a third-party utility. It's not commonly integrated into Linux. It may be part of your favorite Linux distribution, however. The network mapper, Nmap, is one that is most commonly described as a port scanner, but Nmap is so much more than simply a port scanner. As many of you know, I wrote a book on Nmap, so that I've gone through every single nmap command. I know exactly how every scan works. I have breakdowns of every single command and the packet capture for every single command so that you can understand how some of the more esoteric nmap scans might work. Something like some of the more unusual FTP type scans that you would use or proxies that are in place. Great capabilities inside of Nmap and extends even further using those Nmap utilities and scripts. But in this particular case, we're just looking for an Ethernet or IP address on this device. We don't need to use Nmap to be able to do that. I just need to go to the server and type in IP address, and it tells me what the IP address happens to be. So Nmap, not the best choice for this particular scenario. We also have route and ping at about 3% apiece. So route, of course, is well known for viewing the routing table inside of a device. We can also add or remove routes using the route command. And we also have the ping command, which is able to see if a device across the network is responding to queries. We can see if it really is something that is up and running and is able to respond back to us. Neither route nor ping give us information about our local Ethernet adapter address or MAC address. So in this case, our best choice, the one that really gives us exactly what we were looking for in a consolidated view and provides us with details of our system, is the IP command. That's what we would use. We would use ipconfig, ifconfig, or IP with the address option. So we type in IP address to gather that information. And 36% of you that chose that one got the answer absolutely right. Let's do another question since we're on this series of questions. Here's one that we're using with OSI layers. This question asks, a new router has been configured with an incorrect subnet mask. Which OSI layer would be associated with this issue? Is it layer 4, layer 2, layer 7, layer 3, or layer 1? If you think you know the answer, go to the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to be able to answer this question. professormesser.com/QA. So I think this would be a good one to work through. Maybe some of you are familiar with this one. As always, of course, no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to go to the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. The question again asks, a new router has been configured with an incorrect subnet mask. Which OSI layer would be associated with this issue? Is it layer 4, layer 2, layer 7, layer 3, or layer 1? I was thinking of putting all 7 layers in here, but I just kept it to 5 options. So hopefully you can negotiate what you think the answer might be. This is indeed the 5 most popular, I think, in being able to do that. So see if you are familiar enough with OSI and the OSI model to be able to answer this particular question. A lot of you have already locked this one in. This makes me feel like we did really well on this one, that all of us really knew what this one happened to be. So let's see if we're right along those lines. The question again asks, a new router has been configured with an incorrect subnet mask. Clearly, I am the one configuring this router. Which OSI layer would be associated with this issue? Layer 4, layer 2, layer 7, layer 3, or layer 1? And then we can see pretty strong answer. 73% of you say the answer is layer 3. But is it really? Because we have 11% that say it's layer 2, 8% say it's layer 4, only 3% say layer 7, and only about 3% say it layer 1. Well, when we're talking about IP addresses, subnet masks, the IP address of your default gateway, an IP address of a DNS server, or anything relating to IP. If we're dealing with IP address, subnet mask, DNS, default gateway, or anything dealing with an IP address or a subnet mask, we are dealing with layer 3 of the OSI model. Sometimes we refer to this as the routing layer because this is the layer that routers work on, is layer 3. They make their forwarding decisions based on the IP addresses inside of a system. So anything dealing with the Internet Protocol or IP, anything dealing with any of the IP configuration settings are layer 3 is where we are working in the OSI model. If IP is also doing any type of fragmentation, this is also occurring at layer 3. And so anytime you see an IP address, anytime you see a subnet mask, a DNS address, or anything related to the Internet Protocol, it's all operating at layer 3 of the OSI model. That would be the network layer. And indeed, 73% of you say, yep, you're absolutely right. That is the one we were looking for. Layer 3 is the answer to this one. If we have 11% say the answer would be layer 2. If this particular problem was dealing with switches, it was dealing with MAC addresses. Again, that's a media access control address. that address or hardware address of that device operates at OSI layer 2. In this case, we're dealing with a subnet mask. That's part of IP, so it fits very, very much within layer 3. It is not a layer 2 when we're dealing with subnet masks. Layer 4 would be at the TCP or UDP level. So if this question asked you about port numbers, if it was talking about HTTPS operating at port 443, if it was talking about SNMP transmitting across the network using UDP 161, those port numbers, being UDP or TCP port number, all operate at layer 4, and that way you would be correct. But since we were talking about subnet masks, you are one layer away from it. The layer 4 would not be the correct answer here. Layer 7 was 3% of you. Layer 7 is the application layer. That's the layer where us humans are able to see things on the screen. So you watching this video, you're seeing things operate at layer 7. There's certainly things happening behind the scenes, but from an OSI model perspective, the things that you are seeing are the application layer or layer 7. And layer 1 is referring to the signal that's going across the network. So anything that is transmitting with the ones and zeros that are modulating across the network that somehow are able to transmit data from one device to another, that signal is OSI layer 1. So anytime you deal with issues of the signal not working properly, whether it's over a wireless network or a wired network, anything that's operating or having a problem with that signal is something that's OSI layer 1. In this particular case, the answer is indeed what 73% of you chose. Layer 3 is the right answer, and that is the answer we were looking for. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you are here to watch a 1-hour webinar category CEU. Now, if you don't have your Network Plus, then that's not going to be very useful for you. You can't collect these CEUs until you become certified. But for those of you that are using CEUs to renew your certification, those continuing education units can be compiled all together and provided to CompTIA to prove that you were working on your skills as a technologist during that 3-year renewal period. To earn your CEU email from me, you must follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website and click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, it pops up a form. Put your email address, your name. In the subject line, please put March 2024 Network Plus. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, please put the super secret code words of the month, incorrect subnet mask. Incorrect subnet mask are the super secret code words of the month. And that is the one that you would use to be able to send that off to me. Now, you can also put anything else in that message that you would like to. It's a great way to do that. But obviously, you would have to have incorrect subnet mask in that message. And that's the only thing that's there. That's fine too. Hit the submit button, and in about a week or so, you will get an email back from me that certifies that you were here for that 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. Now, unfortunately, you're not able to watch all of my videos to renew your certification. You can only collect a certain number of webinar category CEUs in any 3-year renewal period. But if you're someone who is collecting those, it can be something that might be used towards your renewal. Again, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, put your name, your email address in the subject line, put March 2024 Network Plus, and in the super secret code word of the month, put in the body of the message, the super secret code word is incorrect subnet mask. This can also be used for A+ renewals or Security Plus renewals, because all they look for is something that is associated with the exam objectives for that particular certification. We have time for more questions. Let's do another one. We'll get another question in here to be able to do this. This next question asks, a user has moved to a new desk, but they're not able to log on. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be spanning tree protocol, Ethernet flow control, lag, jumbo frames, or port security? Let's do this question again. It asks, a user has moved to a new desk, but they are not able to log in. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Is it spanning tree protocol, Ethernet flow control, lag, jumbo frames, or port security? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Of course, this is one where you will need to know this answer to be able to get this one correct. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Someone in the chat room is asking, does the study pack include compliance voucher? I have no idea what that means, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. If you want detailed answers about anything relating to the products or training materials on our website, you can always go to the Contact Us link on our site and send me a message directly to be able to do that. Maybe that can help you. And I usually respond to those very quickly so that you're able to get the answer and keep things going and going certainly along those lines. Some of you have some very good answers for this in the chat room, by the way. If you haven't turned on the live chat or on the replay or the replay chat, always a good time. I love the chat room, and they always have a good answer, even if it's an answer that's not in my list of answers. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, a user has moved to a new desk, but they're not able to log in. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be spanning tree protocol, Ethernet flow control, lag, jumbo frames, or port security? Let's see what you asked. If we go through the list on this one, 78% of you say the answer is port security. 12% of you say the answer is spanning tree protocol. We've got 4% that say Ethernet flow control, 3% that say link aggregation or lag, and then 1% say jumbo frames. Well, of these 5 things, which one of these would really be causing this particular issue of someone not being able to log in? Well, if you're someone who's familiar with port security, you know that this can trip you up. Maybe someone was already sitting at that desk previously, and their MAC address has now been registered inside of the switch. That means that if somebody else tries to plug into that particular interface, the switch will recognize that, whoa, this is a new MAC address. Was not expecting that. You are not registered on the switch. I have one MAC address associated with this interface, and it's not you. Therefore, you don't get access. In fact, the switch configuration maintains that config, and you can either have it figure out who last connected and lock that in, or you can manually configure the MAC addresses on that device, and then you tell the switch what to do. If you see someone who's trying to connect to an interface and they are not the registered MAC address for that interface, maybe it is going to prevent them from connecting to the network. Maybe it sends an alert to the network administrator. Maybe it allows 2 or 3 devices, but after that, it won't allow any others. You have the option as the administrator of the switch to determine how you would like the port security to proceed if it happens to see multiple MAC addresses. So you've got other options there to be able to configure. It's all in the switch configuration of your device. And it may not be called port security. It may be called something different, but that is a similar function across many different switches and being able to use it. So our answer of port security, 78% of you chose that one. That is the correct answer for this one. 12% of you, double digits, did say spanning tree protocol. Spanning tree protocol, of course, is the protocol that you would configure inside of a switch that prevents loops on a switched network. This is not something you commonly have to worry about if you're plugging into a user interface, because it's already assumed that somebody plugging into the network with just their single system would not be able to cause a loop on the network. You're only a one device plugging into one interface. So somebody logging in at their new desk is probably not going to be a loop causing an issue. It would not be spanning tree protocol preventing someone from logging in. We've got Ethernet flow control. This is a method within the Ethernet protocol that can slow down the transfer of data across the network. Not always something that is used, but something that can be useful, especially for large file transfers or networks that use a lot of very large file transfers. That would slow things down, but it wouldn't prevent things from happening. In this case, we are prevented from logging in. That would not be the right answer. We have link aggregation at 3%. That's often abbreviated as lag. Link aggregation is a way to send or extend multiple connections between devices and use those multiple links as one large connection. So if you have two Ethernet switches, you can connect those Ethernet switches together with a gigabit wire. Then you've got gigabit connection between those two switches. If you put a second wire between those devices, you've created that loop we were talking about earlier. Can't do that. But we could tell the switch, instead of using that and looping through both of those, use both of those interfaces as a lag, as a link aggregation. And then now you have 2 gigabits of connectivity, of throughput that you could send between those two devices. That bandwidth increases every time you would add different connections to it. So you could put perhaps even 4 different gigabit connections between those two switches, and you can use them all as one single link by implementing a link aggregation config. Now, the other or last choice that we have is jumbo frames. Jumbo frames allow us to have much larger frames than the 1500 bytes that you would commonly associate with an Ethernet frame. I guess 1518 if we're talking about the whole Ethernet frame. But what if you were sending gigabytes or even terabytes of data across the network? Instead of sending these tiny little frames where you have all of this overhead, what if you could make the frame much, much larger? Very common to see frames around 9,000 bytes instead of 1,500. Now you've got a lot larger frames, a lot less overhead, and you can send more data in a shorter period of time. If you're doing a lot of very large file transfers, you might want to look into configuring jumbo frames if it's something that is supported by your switch and by your servers. The answer here, though, because we're not able to log in, is port security. That is the right answer. 78% of you got that answer absolutely correct, and that's what we were looking for. I know that we're at the top of the hour, but let's just fit one more answer in here, one more question in here, just to kind of top things off today. What do you say? Let's do this last question, and it asks, an employee is using their company laptop for personal use while not at work. Which of the following would this be violating? Would it be EULA, AUP, BYOD, onboarding, or DLP? Got a few choices there. The question again asks, an employee is using their company laptop for personal use while not at work. Which of the following would this be violating? Would it be EULA, AUP, BYOD, onboarding, or DLP? You think you know the answer? Follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We're going to try to parse this one out as our final question of the day. Well, not really the final question, because we're going to have an after show and you can ask me any question you would like. And if you would like to do that, by the way, there's a tab at the top of your screen when you visit professormesser.com/QA, and you could submit any of those questions at any time. We're going to go through those questions in the after show. This one is the one that you should focus on in the meantime, though. See if you happen to know this answer. Let's see how you did with this final question of the day. The question asks, an employee is using their company laptop for personal use while not at work. Which of the following would this be violating? Is it EULA, AUP, BYOD, onboarding, or DLP? I just couldn't fit 5 individual abbreviations there, could I? Those acronyms. But we can see that AUP got 74% of the vote. Well, EULA has 11% of the vote. BYOD has 7% of the vote. And then we've got 3% each for onboarding and DLP. So we need to first know what all of these different abbreviations are to be able to answer this particular question. But if you were working with an AUP, then you are probably working with an acceptable use policy. This is a series of policies that determines how you're able to use the equipment and technologies that have been given to you by the company. These aren't your laptops. They're not your phones. These are devices that are being used for company use. In some cases, it might be your phone, but it might still apply to an acceptable use policy, especially as it relates to the company data on that device. This can be in your employee handbook. It might be part of something called a rules of behavior, and it can cover any technology that we're rolling out or anything that we have for our organization. So this is a pretty important thing to consider. A lot of organizations have one of these acceptable use policies because if somebody does take their laptop home and they do something on that laptop that is may be considered untoward or something the company is not comfortable with, then they may decide to have some type of company results from that. They may decide to demote you. They may decide to fire you. They may decide that what you've done on the system violates that acceptable use policy, which means it would be unacceptable. And therefore, there can be some things that might happen afterwards. In fact, in some cases, it might be an illegal thing that may be happening. So this also helps along those lines to follow the proper procedures to handle situations like that, especially from the security perspective. And although you may be saying to yourself, wait, what? I'm just working in IT. What do you mean illegal? Yep, it happens all the time. And if you do get into a role where you're dealing with IT security, it's just going to be part of your job and the things that you will have to deal with. An acceptable use policy is the answer we were looking at here. AUP is the answer. 74% of you got that one absolutely correct. So hopefully that's one where you're now more familiar with what that abbreviation is and how it might work for you. Now, EULA was an answer that 11% of you chose. 11% saying the answer is an end user license agreement. A EULA is that long set of text that you always see when you install software, and it says that you have to agree to this end user license agreement before you're able to continue with the installation of that software. This is a legal contract between you and the manufacturer of the software. So it determines how you're able to use the software, if you're able to deal with wanting, knowing, or at least knowing what you can do on that device with backups and that software with backups. That would be all contained within the end user license agreement. EULA does not determine how you should use or what is acceptable to use that device. It is only saying that if you use the software, you won't make copies of the software. You'll use the software for legal reasons. But that's it. It's really very focused on a specific type of software. The end user license agreement does not have a broad scope. It doesn't cover every piece of equipment in your environment. It doesn't cover every piece of software. It's just very focused on that particular piece of software. We do have BYOD, 7% of you said bring your own device. Bring your own device is what many companies will do. So you'll bring your phone in to the organization. They'll add your phone to their mobile device manager or MDM, and they'll be able to manage the company data on that device while at the same time allowing you to use the other part of the device for personal use. So there is a very nice separation there on most modern MDMs, mobile device managers, to be able to do that. And if you were to leave the organization, they can delete the company data while leaving your information intact on that particular mobile device or telephone. But in BYOD doesn't talk about the violations that someone causes by not using equipment in an authorized form. So in this case, BYOD is not, there's no violation. BYOD describes the type of equipment you're bringing, not how you would use that equipment. Onboarding is the process when somebody joins the organization or moves into a new role within the organization. We onboard them to make sure that they've got somewhere to sit, they've got a telephone number, they've got business cards delivered to them, they have a new laptop, here's your mobile device that we use, here's your tablet, and you get everything when you start with the company. You've already got a login. You've got rights and permissions to run the applications you need. You have access to the share drives you need. All of that is done as part of the onboarding process. Using your laptop for personal use while you're at home is not part of the onboarding process. You're already on board at that point. So it would not be the correct answer. And DLP, data loss prevention, is a way to monitor traffic either on a server or across the network and identify information that should not be transmitted across the network. For example, somebody's transmitting credit card numbers, healthcare information, social security numbers. You can block that information from being traversed or from traversing the network by installing a DLP solution, either as software or standalone appliance. That is something very useful for the IT security folks, but it has nothing to do with using your laptop for personal use. The answer in this case is an acceptable use policy. That was the one we were looking for, and that is the answer that you would choose in this particular example. Hopefully that's given you an idea of things that you might want to do for your acceptable use in your organization. Everybody has a different idea of what acceptable might be. Now, all of these questions we saw today came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. If you don't have a copy of these objectives, you are definitely doing yourself a disservice, because everything you need to know about the exam is in this document, and it's free from the CompTIA website. There's a link over to the CompTIA website. You can follow the link on your screen, professormesser.com/objectives, and that will take you directly over where you can put in your information and download this latest version of the Network Plus exam objectives. Also let you know that you may want to find this through your favorite search engine. Go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. Hopefully that will give you an idea of where you can find these objectives. And as I mentioned, they're free and they tell you everything you need to know about this exam. Make sure you find those and take advantage of those. We do one of these Network Plus study groups every month. Our next study group is scheduled for April the 17th. And I say it's scheduled because sometimes these schedules can change. For those of you that have been following us for a while, you know that can certainly be the case. The chaos that is my life can sometimes change these around. So I highly recommend that you keep track of where the latest schedule might be. You can go to professormesser.com/calendar, which always has the latest set of schedules on it. If any of these dates change, it will be changed first on this calendar, and I usually change it immediately in our Discord server as well. There's an events channel in our Discord server, and I update those as well. We have our A+ study groups on April 9th and 11th, our Network Plus study group on April 17th. And although I also mark here our Security Plus study group on April the 24th, we still haven't done our Security Plus study group for March yet. So next week at this time, this is a Wednesday, the 20th, as we are sitting here today. So Wednesday, the 27th, a week from today, is our Security Plus study group for this month, for March. So you may want to come back next month. You don't have to wait until April. You can get that Security Plus right there. Well, although we are at the top of the hour and a little bit more, we're not done yet. We've got our after show where you can submit questions where I will answer. You can do that, of course, following our link at professormesser.com/QA. Don't forget about our Network Plus Success Bundle on our website. You can find that at professormesser.com/netsuccess. We have our discounted vouchers available if you happen to be in the U.S., Canada, or U.S. territory. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, finding us on social media is so easy. You simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find me on, /LinkedIn, /Discord, /YouTube. And if you would like to help us here with what we are doing, we would love it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're getting so close now to that 900,000 subscriber mark. And right after that will be our 1 million subscriber mark. And we've got to do something fun when we hit that 1 million mark. And this is something that you can help participate in. Go to professormesser.com/YouTube and subscribe to our channel if you would like to be part of that. Well, this brings us to the end of the study group, at least the first part, but we're not done yet. We've got our after show. Stick around for that. Thank you for joining us in this first hour, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody. Okay, let me take a sip. And let's see if we can bring up a better view here. There we are. Now we're back in the studio. Hi, everybody. Let's now get questions up and running. It's our after show, our Network Plus after show, and really any of our after shows are here so that we can answer questions that you have. I've been asking you questions for an hour. How about you ask me something? And one of the ways that you can do this is by going to this link on our screen. There it is. Same link that we were using before, professormesser.com/QA. And I will go through a series of questions that I see on my screen. You may not see them immediately. In fact, if you look at your screen now, you will see it even tells you that you can submit questions for this second hour at any time Now, these are submitted internally on this side. You won't see them pop up on the screen quite yet, but I will be able to go through that list, find the questions that happen to be there, and we can, of course, step through any questions you might have. You can ask me any type of question you would like. You can ask me what the industries what's going on in the industry right now. You might have questions about career. You might have questions about Network Plus or any other certification, or you may have questions about some other topic. You can submit all of those by going to professormesser.com/QA to submit those. Let's see what other questions you have here. Some of these we answered already. So if I don't get back to the question you asked earlier, that's because we were able to focus on those. So let's do this. Let's now focus in on some of the questions that you have and what might be available. Other questions that you have, let's really focus on, let's start with one about VLANs. I like VLANs. So let's focus on this question from Anonymous. It says, when establishing VLANs on a network, what would you consider to be the best practice with establishing subnet masks for these VLANs? So this is one where the VLAN, the idea of a VLAN and the idea of IP addresses are really two different things, but they are intertwined with each other. So let's talk about VLANs and what they are. And let's talk about subnets, IP subnets, and what those are, because they're two different things, and yet they are linked together in some way. So let's talk about this link. A VLAN, a virtual LAN, is a way to segment or create segments of broadcast domains on a switch. As many of you know, the switches that you might get that have no VLANs on it whatsoever, or the entire switch is one VLAN, is one big broadcast domain. And if you cut that switch in half and one half of the switch was on VLAN 1 and the other half of the switch, all of those interfaces were on VLAN 2, you would effectively have now created two separate broadcast domains. We could even split it up further. What if we took that switch and split it up into 4 pieces virtually using that VLAN capability? You have VLAN 1, VLAN 2, VLAN 3, and VLAN 4. Now you have 4 different broadcast domains. Now, for those of you familiar with broadcast domains and you think back to maybe other exams that you may have taken in the past, a broadcast domain is a layer 2 function. It's really operating at that MAC address layer. VLANs, broadcast domains, we'll just say VLANs from this point forward, those VLANs are layer 2 devices, layer 2 components within that switch. So they are all separate individual broadcast domains. An IP address, though, operates at layer 3. Subnet masks, along with that IP address, are layer 3 types of components, if you will, parts and configurations. That's all layer 3 info. Well, broadcast domains operating at layer 2 and IP addresses operating at layer 3, those are different layers. So you would think they would work independently of each other. And interestingly enough, they can work independently of each other, but it's a super bad idea. And we can talk about in more detail later on why you would not want to mix the idea of different VLANs and different IP addresses and different subnets all intermixing with each other. The best practice for VLANs and how they relate to IP subnets is to have, for a single VLAN, we have a single IP subnet. So it's a one-to-one relationship in the best possible scenario there. There are some configurations, and I've seen some companies that might have a single VLAN, and that single VLAN has multiple IP subnets on top of it. Can that work? It could with the right configuration. Should you do that? No, you should not. There are very few times when you would run against a limitation associated with VLANs. And in fact, there are other ways to extend the capabilities of VLANs that go beyond the idea of a VLAN. And perhaps the next Network Plus might dive into that a little bit more. But our current Network Plus kind of focuses on the VLAN side so that you have a very large number of VLANs that you can choose from. You should really associate a single IP subnet with a single VLAN. So VLAN 1 has IP subnet 1. VLAN 2 is IP subnet 2. VLAN 3 is IP subnet 3. Now, of course, that IP subnet is probably a much bigger IP address range, but you want to keep those separated. So when you get into the question that was asked earlier, which is, what is the best practice with establishing subnet masks for these VLANs? You don't tend to establish a subnet mask for a VLAN. You tend to create an IP subnet, which is a combination of an IP address range with a subnet mask. They're tied together. Those two things are associated with each other. You take those ranges that you're defining with that IP address range and that subnet mask, and you associate those with a VLAN. Now, if you create a new VLAN, you're going to have to go back and get a different IP subnet, which may use the same subnet mask, but it's a completely different range of IP addresses, and you would associate that with a different VLAN. So you're always got this one-to-one relationship with VLANs to IP subnets, VLANs to IP subnets. You don't want to separate IP subnets across different VLANs. You don't want to put multiple IP subnets on the same VLAN. A one-to-one relationship is the best practice. And as I mentioned, there are places where I have seen people mix that up a little bit and have multiple IP subnets on a single VLAN, but almost always it becomes incredibly difficult when you're trying to plan, when you're trying to route, when you're trying to manage, especially manage multicast traffic, manage broadcast traffic. It becomes very complicated and in some cases difficult to manage along those lines. So I highly recommend you always focus on keeping a one-to-one relationship and you'll be fine. So great question about VLANs. As you are planning your network, make sure you keep that one-to-one relationship and you'll be fine. And I'm sure someone will send me an email saying, that's not how we do it at our company. Here's how we do it. I've seen it. I know. I've been to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies and seen their networks and their designs. I've seen, I think, every kind of network design you can think of, some that are immaculate and amazing and some that are an absolute train wreck disaster. So don't be the train wreck disaster. Best practices, we call that because it is the best. It's the thing you should be practicing. Don't do it another way because somebody else set it up that way. Okay, but did they know what they were doing? They'll tell you they did, but I guarantee you they did not because they didn't follow the best practices. It will catch up with you eventually and practically always. Now, there may be times, just for those of you, because I'm looking forward to your cards and letters, there may be times when you have multiple IP subnets on the same VLAN because of a transition that you're doing. Maybe you're transitioning out certain IP addresses. Maybe you're converting an IP address range. That's completely reasonable. If it's a short-term planned effort to be able to move those from one to another, that makes sense. But for a permanent installation, no, you don't want to do that. Let's do another question. Enough about VLANs already. I go blah, blah, blah with the VLAN and focusing in on these. Let's do another one on this list. This is a very generic question, but I think we can talk about it because of the term that was used here. This is from you, who says, what's STP? Well, depends on who you ask. It could be a series of fuel additives that you put in your car. Fuel is the thing that we used to use in cars before there were electric vehicles. So that may be something that we can use. Now, STP also from the networking perspective could be spanning tree protocol. We talked about STP being enabled in a switch so that switches don't cause loops on our layer 2 networks. Spanning tree protocol, very good example of that. But STP might also be shielded twisted pair. So if you're planning to run networking cable on your network and you would like to use cable that is protected from any type of external radio frequency interference or RFI, you might want to use a shielded cable. And instead of just using unshielded twisted pair or UTP, we could put a foil shield inside of this cable to protect it from that external electrical interference. And we refer to that as STP. So whenever you see these abbreviations, there's probably some context that goes along with it. Because people have asked me, well, how do I know how to answer a question if it asks me, what's STP? Well, the answer is that they're very rarely going to ask you in a very simple question, what is STP? Especially since CompTIA and myself and all of us know there are multiple answers to that particular question. You should always look into the question itself to gain context. If the question's talking about loops on a switch network, then we know the STP is referring to spanning tree protocol. If we're talking about running a copper cable through a manufacturing department where there's tons of equipment, then we're probably talking about a shielded twisted pair. So that's why if you're ever in this world of these, it's not just any one or two. There may be 3, 4, 5 different acronyms associated with that particular series of letters. So always have a look at what the different options are and get more familiar with the context of the question, and it should point you in the right direction for all of those and working through it. So let's question from Leo. This is a question about the vouchers that are on my site. So Leo asks, is the voucher only for U.S. residents? This is referring specifically to the vouchers that are on my website. Why don't we go to my website? We'll go to professormesser.com/vouchers. And this is the voucher page that comes up. In fact, I've got a couple more I need to add to this list because CompTIA keeps creating new certification. So that's something for me to do this weekend. You can see on this list, there's quite a few to choose from: A+, Network Plus, Security Plus. But I'm going to tell you, if you're trying to figure out how are these used, who can use them, what are these good for, if you scroll down to the bottom, there are important terms and conditions. These are super important terms and conditions. And it tells you in this list that the vouchers on my site, these are not vouchers in general, but the ones that are on my site, can only be used by individuals physically located in the United States, Canada, Puerto Rico, and Guam. Although that's not entirely true. It really applies to all U.S. territories. Was not always the case. I had to remind the folks at CompTIA that the Northern Mariana Islands are indeed part of the United States with U.S. dollars and part of the U.S. So anything that is a U.S. territory or Canada applies for or can be used by individuals physically located in those locations. So if you are an American citizen, but you're living in London, you can't use these vouchers. You have to be able to do that. So make sure that if you are someone who is kind of focusing on who can use these vouchers and why are these vouchers here, just scroll down to the important terms and conditions. I will bet the question that you have about vouchers is probably listed in here. Make it very easy for you to go through that list and know exactly what to choose. It can maybe answer the question. If you still aren't sure, just click the option at the top of the screen for contact us and send me a note. We'll figure out the details from that. Some folks in the chat room were saying, well, I'll use a proxy or I'll use a VPN. You cannot use a proxy or VPN when you are doing an online exam. It won't let you do that. So you may try to say that you are not in that country, but you will find that you will be in that country. This can be a problem if you are, for example, on a U.S. base and you are in Germany. Well, you can't use online. You can't use, at least you can't use your ID, your military ID for online, but it may pop up as you living in Germany. You're physically located in Germany, even though you're on a U.S. base, which there is some international law there. We can have an argument about whether you're in the U.S. or not in the U.S. at this point, but because you're located in a different country, you can't use these vouchers if you happen to be there. You have to be physically located in the United States or Canada. That's your idea. So keep that in mind as you are stepping through those. Those terms and conditions can be pretty important, and you don't want to have the wrong ones on that list. Let's keep going with this list and being able to break these things down. I've got more questions. Thank you for sending these in. If you'd like to submit a question, you can always do that by going to professormesser.com/QA. That's the link that is on your screen, and be able to break these down and see what these are. Other questions. I love questions like this one. So the question from Trevor, it's a leading question. He's leading the witness, Your Honor. How up to date with the current IT reality is? And I'm putting a lot on you, Trevor. You probably, that's not what you were asking. I'm sort of giving it more of a flair, more of a theatrical type style. How up to date with the current IT reality is N10-008? I'm not sure what IT reality is, but let's assume you mean, is the content that's in the exam objectives content that's actually used on people's networks today? And the answer is yes. In fact, I often turn these around and ask, what in the exam objectives do you feel is not part of the current IT reality? And then we can have a conversation about whether it is or not. One of the interesting things about networking, and in fact, it fits better in this scenario when you certainly get into it, is the exam itself. When you start getting into the details of the exam itself, and networking in general, when you install new equipment or new technology as networking devices, they tend to stick around for a very long period of time. It's very different than, for instance, an operating system. If you go look at the A+ exam, the A+ exams are rotated through about every 3 years. Every 3 to 3.5 years, we get a new version of the A+ exam objectives. And every 3 years, there are quite a few changes with operating systems, because operating systems they usually rotate through about every 3 years or so. But networking doesn't work that way. Networking, once we put in an access point, that access point may sit there for 10 years or longer. In fact, if you go into the networking section of a data center, you will find equipment there that is brand new. You will also find equipment there that is 25 years old. I guarantee you will find 25-year-old hubs, switches, routers, because it just keeps running. It just keeps working. And if it's working, why would we get rid of that? Why would we remove it? Now, obviously, many environments have faster configurations. They've got configurations that they need faster networks. They need more capability. They need higher bandwidths. Obviously, they're going to swap equipment out for that. But that doesn't always tend to be what you will find. You will find new equipment, certainly, but you'll probably also find some old equipment there too, very old equipment. But that doesn't mean that what's on the Network Plus is old, though, either. In fact, I look at the Network Plus exam objectives, and everything on the objectives is equipment, technologies, and things we need to know that we're using on our networks today. So I tell people all the time that people will say CompTIA exams they're old, they're out of date, they're not modern, they don't have the latest thing on there. And my response is, well, let's go through that. Give me an example of what you believe is no longer used on today's networks, and we'll talk about it. And almost always, the response back to me is silence. There's no answer, or they'll pick something and not realize the scope of how that particular technology is used today. And maybe they just didn't know. Oh, we're doing that on today's networks. We sure are. So that's what we're really focusing on and trying to understand and work through. Maybe it's something that you will find as well. But I think everything on the N10-008 is up to date with the latest IT reality. I don't know what that means, but I think what it means is everything on the exam's legit. You could walk into a data center today and find everything listed in the exam objectives. So I think that's pretty important. Since we're on this topic of the reality of these exams, I think we should take a question about the reality of these exams. Let's take this one from McDonald, and who asks, I want to venture into IT via CompTIA. A lot of people do that. Many people tell me that A+ is really not a necessary cert. Should I start with Network Plus? What's your take, Professor? Your so-called take. Let's talk about the IT reality. I'm just going with that now. I love that whole term, the terms that we've set up in here. The answer to this, and almost 100% of the time, whenever somebody on the internet tells me that a particular certification is not important, almost 100% of the time, the person saying that doesn't have that cert. They have no idea what it takes to earn that cert. They've never done it themselves. They don't really understand the scope. Maybe they heard what somebody else said and they're just repeating it, but they really haven't gone into the details of the certification itself to understand really how that would apply. So I tell people the value of a certification is based on what you do with it. And I think that's where you should focus your efforts, especially when you start talking about today's certifications. You're really dealing with understanding what this is going to do for you. So, for example, and I think this would be a good answer to this question, go out to your favorite online job posting site. Go to dice.com, go to LinkedIn Jobs, go to any of them that are out there, the Link Recruiter, go to anything and search for help desk jobs. Search for CompTIA A+, search for entry-level IT, and see how many of those jobs come up with a requirement of knowing or having a compatible or similar knowledge to the A+ certification. There's your answer. If people are hiring based on you having the A+ cert, that's a pretty important cert. Now, you will also certainly come across jobs where A+ is not mentioned. For those jobs, A+ isn't important, or at least it's not part of the job description they put in there. But knowing that you could show up to an interview and know all of the knowledge that is contained within the A+, which contains operating systems, hardware, networking, security, and how you would use and apply these technologies, that's some valuable knowledge. That's things that you could have a conversation with someone about and talk technology. You know, without knowing those technologies, without knowing the technical terms, without understanding how they're applied, it can even be difficult to understand the questions that are posed to you. So even if they don't specifically say, we want you to have an A+, you may find that having the A+ actually provides you with a little bit of value. That's something I think we kind of gloss over a lot with certifications, is that we often talk about certs as a pathway to our career progression, as getting that job or getting that next job. But what we often don't think about is the knowledge that we are accumulating during the process of going through the certification is knowledge that we're going to use the rest of our career. Now, I'll take, for example, let's take me, for example, since I'm the one that's here. Let's go back in time. This is where the screen will swirl. If we go back in time 25 years, when I'm just kind of getting started, I'm barely out of middle school. I'm very young. I just got in there. And I think as we go through and I start looking at the world around me, I thought it would be good to get a Microsoft certification. So I went out and I got a Microsoft, at the time they referred to this certification as an MCSE. It's a term that they've dropped and then they brought back, and I think they dropped it again. I'm not sure where they are in the world of Microsoft MCSE. Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer, I think, is what they ended up sticking with. The MCSE was probably one of the most desired certifications if you're working in the Microsoft world. And I think that's one of those that really helps you quite a bit, because now you had to pass 6 different certification exams to call yourself MCSE certified. There were other certified professional, the MCPs, and other types of certifications that layered into that. But Microsoft retired all of those. Then they brought back some of those terms, and then they dropped them again. So we go back and forth over these terms and what Microsoft calls them. But the point I'm making with this is that I went through all 6 of those exams. I learned about Windows, sort of the underlying how Windows operates, how memory is used, how the drive systems and the file systems are used within Windows, how to do redundant and build RAID type arrays within the operating systems, and all about Active Directory. This is 25 plus years ago. This is a while back, and I earned that MCSE. So I learned all about the Windows operating system. So today, let's fast forward, and now we're today. We're back to the current time. Now, when we talk about Microsoft Windows, we're talking about how memory is used, how file systems are used, the capabilities of the file systems, and Active Directory. Well, it's knowledge that I accumulated during this process of earning that certification is knowledge that I have used this entire time. So you end up seeing these technologies at the very beginning as you're learning them, but then you stick with them. They're around for the rest of your career. So every cert that you earn, you're building your knowledge base and you're leveling up each time, and you're becoming more knowledgeable in how these technologies interoperate with each other, which is another level to this we don't often talk about. But that is exactly where we might focus with this particular question is, what is necessary? The question McDonald asked is, people tell me A+ is not necessary. What do they mean? It's not necessary if somebody doesn't want you to have the A+, but what if all of the jobs that you are submitting to all want you to be A+ certified? In that example, it's absolutely necessary. So there are no shortcuts. There are no easy buttons. There's no simple way to bypass hiring managers' requirements. And in many cases, earning these certifications give you even more. They give you more knowledge. They give you more a broader scope of the way the industry and technologies work. It's not just about getting that job or getting that next job or getting that next paycheck. Very often it's about building a foundation that you will be able to use for the rest of your career, and you'll be able to build upon that foundation, whether a hiring manager needs that or not. So it's up to you to decide whether it's necessary or not some third party, not somebody else off the internet, not even friends that you know. You should look at what you want to do and what hiring managers want you to have, and you make the decision on whether the A+ is good or not. So I think that's where you should focus. Let's do some more questions. So we got time, right? Yeah, we absolutely do. So let's go through this list. Here's a pretty good one. And I think this comes up quite a bit because people look at this technology and they think it works in ways, or they think it should work in different ways, and they might be right along those lines. This is from Ethan, who asks, would an IoT device use a multicast address to be able to communicate with all devices on the network? IoT being an Internet of Things device. So if we think about Internet of Things, these are what we have in our house. I literally installed an Internet of Things doorbell this morning. So I'm ready to go with an Internet of Things question. This IoT device, you have lights that may be in your house that are IoT devices. You might have now built into all of our appliances we buy. If you buy a new refrigerator, an oven, a washer and dryer, they all have this IoT functionality built into them. It's devices that are not computers, but now they're on the internet and they're on your local network. They're a perfect jumping off point for anyone wanting to hack your local network. IoT is our biggest security concern, one of our biggest security concern these days, because the people who build ovens are not necessarily the best security technologists. So that's what I worry about. Is IoT is great. It is convenient. It allows me to change the temperature in my house without getting out of bed. I can just get on my phone and make it warmer or make it colder, but there is a security concern there. But the question from Ethan specifically talks about multicast. Multicast technology, as we talk about in the Network Plus, is where we can send out one packet onto the network and multiple devices on the network can see that single packet and be able to use the data within those packets. It's very efficient. Normally, for a broadcast, you would send a broadcast out and every device on the network receives that broadcast and has to process it. Multicast can be sent to a subset of the network, making it much more efficient than broadcasts. But the devices, the applications, the infrastructure, switches, and routers all have to be multicast knowledgeable and configured to allow multicast communication. So it's not something that is commonly used. It's usually a very specific type of app that is designed to use multicast, even though it seems like there should be an easier way to do this. Let's take this live stream, for example. I'm sending a video to YouTube right now. I'm sending a single video stream to YouTube. YouTube is taking that single video stream and they are re-rendering it into different forms. So there is a 1080p stream, there's a 720p stream, there's probably a 480p stream. These are all these different streams because people will watch this live stream on different devices, and some devices need more resolution, some devices don't need that much resolution. So you can pick the most efficient stream for you to be able to watch this on. The thing that you run into is if I'm sending that single stream to YouTube, YouTube has to send how many people are on the stream right now. So if I look at the stream and we look at how many people are hanging out, we have on the stream currently almost 300 folks. So 300 people are on the stream right now. YouTube doesn't send a multicast packet and only 300 people have to view it. It sends 300 separate unicast streams out on the network. And you may be thinking that's very inefficient. Why is it doing that? If you could just send one packet that gets to those 300 people, why are you sending 300 separate streams? You're effectively 300 times the bandwidth required to send it to all 300 of those people by using unicast instead of multicast. And that's because multicast is very difficult to manage across a very long distance and certainly across multiple networks. If you're in your own network and this traffic was only being sent on the single network that you're using, multicast might be a very good option. But YouTube's not doing that. YouTube is sending this signal around the world. And when that happens, every device around the world would need to be configured to understand the multicast that's coming from YouTube to be able to properly send that traffic efficiently. And that is not practical. There's clearly a situation there where you're never going to be able to coordinate everybody in the world to be able to properly manage multicast that way. Well, the way that we've adjusted to that, as we do with most things, and talk to every IT manager in the world, and they will tell you this, the way that you address these problems is you throw bandwidth at it. That is the answer. Is it elegant? Nope. Is it efficient? Nope. Does it save a lot of money? It does not. In fact, it costs money. It is inefficient, but it's the only way to reliably send that data over the network and be able to have it get to the other side. So if you were on your own network internally, maybe IoT is an option. You have an IoT device like your doorbell. The doorbell rings. It would be great if that IoT device sent all of that traffic via multicast out over your network and was able to send it to everybody who happened to be monitoring the doorbell at that time. That's not how it works. When the doorbell rings and you bring up your app, in fact, it might not even be talking to your doorbell. It may be talking to a cloud server that your doorbell is talking to. So multicast is not commonly used with IoT devices. One thing that is probably the largest derivation from that is if you have some cameras, video cameras, surveillance cameras in your home for security, those cameras very commonly do have an option to use multicast to multicast that out to multiple DVRs on your network. That is very unusual to have that, but very large companies might have that configuration so that only one stream of video, because video is very big, it's very fat, it uses a lot of bandwidth. You don't want to send multiple streams of that. So instead they send one very large high definition stream out via multicast and it goes across your network that way. That's a good example of where you might use that in your home. Most IoT devices do not, because IoT devices very rarely have to talk to multiple devices simultaneously. Even your streaming server, maybe you're connecting to Netflix, maybe you're looking at the Apple streaming, Apple TV, maybe you're on Disney Plus, maybe you're watching those. Those are all unicast. Those are not multicast. So things that we think should be multicast are not. And the reason is complexity and being able to do that across long distances, across multiple devices. Not really the distance, it's really all the different devices between you and that other side that create the problem there. So that's why don't commonly see multicast. And if you're interested, it's very easy to find multicast. You don't even have to set up any type of port mirror or tap a network. Just start Wireshark. What? You haven't downloaded Wireshark yet? Go download Wireshark, run Wireshark, capture some packets, get into the packets, understand what's going on. It will help you not only with things that you're looking at from your Network Plus perspective, That's a skill that will help you the rest of your career. Let me tell you, I'm speaking specifically as a systems engineer who used to work at Network General, and everything you needed to know about the sniffer, I could tell you at that time. I've probably forgotten half of it, but the skills that you learn capturing the packets, monitoring TCP, looking at the IP headers, understanding what's happening at the physical layer, looking at the layer 2 wireless protocols, understanding the wide area network communication, the dynamic routing updates, the multicast, the broadcast, the unicast, they're all there for you to see with packet captures. And Wireshark is a free way to gather those packets from the network that you happen to be on. Go grab Wireshark, play around with that. There's a whole world of knowledge available to you just by starting up Wireshark. You will spend your career trying to master the details within that application, and you still won't be able to know everything. It's a fantastic app. You should absolutely learn that. You should know about Nmap. You should get as much Linux. There's things, I have a whole list of things that would be great for you to do, but those are certainly important ones. And from my background in being that packet person, understanding what's happening at the packet level, it unlocks everything. How many times have you been at your job, those of you that work in technology today, and you go to a meeting or you're standing around and people are complaining about, hey, this application is so slow. I think it's the server. I think it's the network. I think it's the drive array. I think it's black holes. People come up with crazy ideas about why the network is slow. And we all just sort of, well, let's try plugging it in somewhere else. Let's try replacing the copper with fiber. People just start trying things. They just started plugging, connecting, seeing what happens. What they should be doing is capturing the packets. Because as it turns out, the answer is right in front of them. The answer is on the network. All you have to do is look at the packet capture and have somebody that knows how to read the packet capture. Turns into the Matrix, right? The screen with it looks like just crazy characters that are flowing down the screen. But once you start to understand what that language is inside the packets, it all starts being pieced together for you. It all becomes very clear, I guess, just like it did in the Matrix. So you could really understand what's happening, and you can answer the question very, very, very definitively where the delays are associated with this application just by examining the packets. It's there. People that have spent months and months and months of time and who knows how much money have had all of their problems solved by someone walking in with a protocol analyzer, plugging it in, and in less than an hour have solved all of the problems, have pointed directly to where the problem is occurring, and can give recommendations on how to solve that issue. Literally 6 months of problems, tens of thousands or more dollars have been wasted. Someone walks in, packet capture, and they've solved everything. It tells you everything about the network. So that's something I would recommend you. That's just one skill that is going to be very powerful for you to use in your world of networking going forward. So definitely do that. Put it on your list. That should be something you can do. So that ties in very well with the question from Jess. And this question asks, at what point of the learning process should we start doing labs and projects to put all this information to practice? I'm currently taking the A+, planning to take Network and Security Plus next. Is now too soon? Now is never too soon. You could start doing this today. So I just gave you a project. I just gave you Wireshark to download. So go do that. Let me give you another one. Go download, if you haven't already, if you don't have a virtual machine manager, a hypervisor of some kind running on your desktop, you need one. So go get, along with Wireshark, go get any of the available virtual machine managers that happen to be out there. So on my computer, let's see if I may have removed all of the good ones on my system. Who knows if they're there or not. I think I do have, I want to bring up the one that I have there. Boy, there's a lot of stuff in my list of things here, in my goodie bag of things. The ones that I use on this machine and that I find is most useful for Mac OS are things like what I'm using. Parallels Desktop is what I use on the Mac, but that's a commercial product. You would need to pay for it to do that. I think if you're starting out with virtualization and you're running Windows, Linux, or Mac OS, go get VirtualBox. It's free, it's easy to use, and it's very fast. It's very good. So VirtualBox is a great place to start. And I think that's what you should do, is use VirtualBox for this. If you're using other operating systems, Mac OS can be somewhat of a challenge, especially if you're on their newer chipset, the M1, M2, M3, etc. You may want to use software that has been specifically written for those newer chipsets, which means there may be a little bit of a cost associated with that. But for those of you running Windows, running Linux, VirtualBox is a great solution. Once you have VirtualBox installed, now you need a virtual machine. So download your favorite Linux distribution. Go grab Red Hat. Go grab Debian. Go grab anything. Go grab Ubuntu. Go install it into a virtual machine. And if you're wondering, how do you do that? Trust me, there are tons of videos and websites that will step you through the process of installing it into a virtual machine. So if you've never used Linux because you're running Mac OS or you're running Windows, now's the time to install Linux as a virtual machine because it won't affect your local OS. You can't break anything on your local machine. If you're going to break something, you break something in the VM. And in fact, the virtual machine has the way to snapshot your operating system in the VM so that if you do break it, you just revert back to a previous snapshot. Can't go wrong. I use that functionality all the time because I have a separate lab that I've set up with a copy of my ProfessorMesser.com website that I run locally in a VM. I do my testing on that VM. If the testing goes well, I roll it out into production. So that's something that you could do as well. Load up more software in Linux. Go load up a database server. Go load up a web server. Go load up something like maybe WordPress, some type of content management system, and get all those three things working together. There's your next project. And if somebody says, do you have any familiarity with LAMP? And you can say, yes, I do, because I just installed a copy of my favorite content management system, WordPress, and I loaded up Linux, and I loaded up MySQL, and I loaded up Apache, and it's all running with PHP underneath. I got my LAMP. So that's what you should focus on, is those types of things. If you're in the world of security, you might want to load VirtualBox and load up some type of open source firewall. Go load up pfSense, for example. pfSense is a good one. Maybe load up Snort if you want to try something that is an IDS IPS type functionality. And many times these applications will overlap with each other so that you can load up the pfSense firewall with the IPS functionality of Snort right on top of it. Great. Another great thing to apply. Maybe you want to try running some security tools that are only available in Linux, run them in a VM. So those are things you can do right now that you can start working with practice on those things. And those are simple things. I'll give you one more for your Windows people. You've got this virtual machine running. Microsoft allows you to download copies of Microsoft Server. You can run the server software for, I think it's 180 days as an eval. Load that up as a VM. Now you're running your own Active Directory infrastructure. So now you've got that running. And in fact, it's going to be a little harder than what I just said. There's a couple of caveats to that I'm not going to tell you about because you need to work through it and understand why it's so difficult to get Active Directory running sometimes, at least the first time. And then you may want to run a separate VM on the same desktop that connects to Active Directory, and you can manage that device through Active Directory. So for those of you that have kind of followed my A+ course, there's some Active Directory stuff in A+. All of that's done in VMs. On your screen, it looks like I'm running Windows Server. It looks like I'm running a Windows 7 or Windows 10 or Windows, whatever I'm running there. All of that works together. So now you're not only familiar with installing Active Directory, you've built your own Active Directory infrastructure, you've connected a device, and you've been able to manage it all from that Active Directory front end, all virtually, all in its own virtual machine. So that's a great question with the labs there. I think that's perfect for someone who is trying to find ways to apply this knowledge, especially if you're interested in having a good experience during an interview. And one of the best things you can do during an interview is talk about the things that you have loaded in that virtual machine, what broke, how you fixed it, and then what it told you. And every hiring manager would love to hear these stories when you walk in the door. I tell you, nobody else is going to have stories like that. It really differentiates you from the other people that are interviewing for these same jobs. Let's do some more questions. Say, take a sip. Okay. Let's go through another list of these. I think we have some of these. There is a question on here. Let's keep going through this list. Let me archive a couple more, clear things out. Some great questions coming in. By the way, you can submit questions by using the link on your screen. We're coming at the top of the hour. I want to fit in at least a couple more and be able to get through these and focusing in on the details of it. Other questions. Let's see. Here's some pretty good ones. Since we're on the world, we were talking a little bit about security. Let's talk about this question from Jorge, who says, I live in Latin America. In my country, when searching for cybersecurity jobs, I don't see in the requirements any of the CompTIA certifications. I see ITIL, not security, CEH, questionable security, CCSP, and mini ISO. Should I still study for CompTIA Network Plus Security Plus? If I get the CompTIA certs, is there any chance I can work remotely on cybersecurity? Okay, let's try to unpack this one. There's 3 or 4 things that we can pull across here and have a look at what's going on. So let's first talk about, as I mentioned before, the value of a certification is what you do with it. And if you look at every job in your particular geography and you're finding that nobody is asking for Security Plus, then why would you take Security Plus? That's a perfectly valid way to approach this issue, especially if the hiring managers are asking for other certifications. So I think that's the important part here is we want to understand what's going to get us that job. And if they're saying you need ITIL, you need CEH, even though I don't think ITIL really helps you in the world of cybersecurity, I should have just stopped there. It really doesn't help you. I don't think CEH is exactly the best organization to get a certification from. But if the hiring managers are asking for those, and every job you come across is a hiring manager asking for both of those certs, go get both of those certs. Of course you should, even if you don't like them. Even if you think the certification is not as valuable as taking some other certification, it doesn't matter what you think. What matters is what the hiring manager thinks. So you should follow their lead. Now, that doesn't mean after you get the job that you can't study anymore. After you get the job that you got the ITIL or you got the CEH, now go get Security Plus. Now go get a Palo Alto Network certification. Now go get one of these other certs that you're interested in, because ultimately the knowledge you learn from studying for the cert is going to help you in anything else you do in your career. I guarantee you the security concerns we have in North America are exactly the security concerns we have in Latin America, in South America, in Europe, in Asia Pacific. It's the same around the world. So you should focus on what makes sense for you, where you're trying to get the job, then study for what the job wants. But once you get the job, you need to plan for the future. And having that foundation that you can build on becomes an important part of that. Now, the last question on here says, if I get the CompTIA certs, is there any chance you can work remotely in cybersecurity? It used to be, obviously, years ago that we all worked remotely. That was great. Good times, everybody. Now, everybody seems to be going back to the office. So this is one where we are returning to work. We're returning to the desk. So we're getting on the road. We're going back to the office. We're working with the folks that are there and doing things in person. There are still plenty of jobs, networking jobs, security jobs, IT jobs in general, that are remote positions, because there were a lot of remote positions before we all converted to staying at home and then going back to work, those remote positions are also still out there today. They are relatively few and far between. You don't tend to find a lot of remote jobs, relatively speaking. It's a relatively small percentage of the total number of jobs available in IT. So I would first tell you not to limit yourself, because you tend to have to work into remote position jobs. You have to have some type of skill set that's so unique that you have the leverage to say, I don't want to come into the office. I'm going to do everything from home. And they'll say, well, since you're one of only a handful of people in the world that do this, that's fine with us. And we'll pay you a lot of money too. Is that okay? Yes. There you go. It's perfectly fine. Send the money to my house, and then I will do everything from here. And they'll say, that sounds great. But you have to work up to that point. Most help desks are not going to be at your house, because we can get anybody to do a help desk. We want them in this one single room where you can talk with other people about the problems that people are calling in with, and you can discuss that and collaborate with other folks. You can argue that you could do that from home. I would argue that you're probably right, but that doesn't tend to be what the managers want. They want you in the office. And there is value to being face-to-face with people. There are ways to collaborate easier when you're in person with each other than collaborating over the internet. Can you collaborate over the internet? Yes. This is a perfect example of how you can do that. But it doesn't always work that way. So I would recommend that you go through the process of building the foundation, getting those certifications, collecting and focusing on those niches of technology that will build your knowledge base. Then you'll be able to leverage that knowledge base into a remote position. And you do have to be careful what you ask for. The last 25 years of my career plus was a remote position. I did not work in an office. I traveled. My job was 85, 90% travel. So you wake up on Monday, you get on a plane, you go places, you hop in the car, you drive here, you get on a train, you go to this place, you see 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 companies during the day, you spend the night in a hotel, and you repeat the same thing on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, and maybe you come home on Friday. That's how it usually works. Sometimes you get to come home one day a week. So maybe it's 80% of the time you are remote. Then you have a home office for a day. So you get to decide, though, what that job looks like. That type of job's a lot of fun, by the way. It's just a lot of travel. You have to plan for that. You have to have an idea behind that. That particular position was a systems engineer, senior systems engineer position for technology companies. There's a lot of great jobs out there. I worked with some of the smartest people I've ever met, some of the funnest people I've ever worked with, people that I kind of keep up with what they're doing even today on the LinkedIn and online, hear from some folks every now and then. Just a great way to work with great people. So that's another fun thing to do, is to find those types of jobs where you're not in an office. It's different every day. You're solving different problems every day when you wake up. You never know what you're going to run into. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes not as good. Most of the time it's super good. And the rest of the time you just have to figure out how to make it good. So that's where I would go. Let's do another question. I know we're after the top of the hour. Let's do another one and see what we might work through there. Other questions. I want to give a good one. Oh, so this is a, we'll kind of finish up with this one. We're talking about release dates and other things. And Jason has looked at the numbers and said, well, if the N10-008 retires in the 4th quarter of this year, they must be planning to put a new version of the Network Plus out, which indeed is going to be called, not too difficult to figure out, the N10-009. CompTIA has not officially announced any release dates for any new versions of Network Plus. There is work underway. They will obviously need to release a new version of Network Plus. It's been 3.5 years. It's time for a new version. We expect that. But the current version, the N10-008 that we are currently working with, will still be around until the 4th quarter of this year. You've got plenty of time. We're in March. You've got plenty of time to learn everything you need to learn in this current version. Don't worry so much about when the next version will be here. The way CompTIA usually does this also is they will release a new exam version, but there's usually about 6 months overlap between the time that newer version is released and the time the older version is retired. They do that so that if you've been studying this whole time, that one day you just don't wake up and everything is switched around and now you have to go buy new books and watch new videos and get new exam objectives, because things do change between different versions. Sometimes the changes can be relatively dramatic. So this is the case we have now, is that there will be an N10-009 release. If they're doing this in Q4, if they're getting rid of the current version in Q4, well, we can bring it back maybe Q2. So sometime in the next 3 months, you might see a new release, but we don't know yet because CompTIA has not officially announced any dates. But as soon as they do, we'll certainly talk about it in our study groups. We'll know exactly when those dates are, and I'll be able to give you more of a realistic time frame on when a new version may arrive. Now, the good part is, and the thing I would highly recommend for everybody who's listening to that, you're wondering, oh, maybe I'll wait for the new version. Bad idea. Super bad idea. Ridiculously bad idea. Never wait to get certified. Never wait to get certified. Having that certification in your pocket is valuable. It is incredibly valuable on the search of jobs, and it's valuable for your own personal knowledge of what you can do over the next 3 to 6 months, or at least until the end of the year. So if you are delaying the process of you learning this content, you're delaying the process of earning that certification, you're also delaying your career. And we only have so much time here, everybody. That people say this all the time, is that we're in a limited, the clock is ticking. There's only so much time in the day. There's only so many days that we have available to do all of these things. Now's the time to get certified. Never wait to get certified. So whenever the N10-009 releases is not as important as when the 008 is scheduled to retire. That's Q4 of this year. You've got plenty of time. Keep going with your studies on the N10-008. Do not wait, delay, or even think that a newer version of the exam even gives you any advantages, because, by the way, it doesn't. If you go out today, let's say that they introduced the N10-009 today, and you went out and you took the N10-009 exam and you passed it and you got Network Plus certified. Let's say also today, someone else goes and takes the N10-008, because it's not going to go away until the end of the year. So they took the older exam, and I say that in quotes because there's nothing old on that exam. It's simply a different set of exam objectives. They took that version of the exam and they passed it. They also became Network Plus certified. The Network Plus that the N10-009 taker earned and the Network Plus that the N10-008 person earned is the same Network Plus. It's exactly the same cert. The certification doesn't have a version. It's just Network Plus. That's it. In fact, if you took your Network Plus 10 years ago and you passed it, took that version of the exam, maybe you took the N10-004 or 005 or 006 or 007, you know where it's going with that. So you took it 10 years ago and passed, and then every 3 years you have renewed your cert. You are just as Network Plus certified as somebody who takes their exam today and passes it. So the version of the exam is not as important as passing one of those exams and earning your Network Plus cert. The goal is the certification. The goal isn't what version of the questions you take. That's the important part, is to get the cert and put it in your pocket. So I highly encourage you to not take your foot off the accelerator. Keep going with your studies. Get through this version of the exam. Pass it. And if you do that now, when we know that the average time it takes to pass this exam is about 2 to 3 months, you will have completed your exam and earn your certification before a new version is even released. That's an important consideration. So waiting around is actually a very big negative at this point. Don't wait around, because other people are going to earn their cert. They're going to have their certification, and they're going to get that job instead of you, because you're waiting for some reason for a version of exam that gives you no advantage. So that's an important thing to think about. Make sure you are familiar with what options are available to you at what time. We don't know when CompTIA will make an official announcement. They will certainly provide us with dates and information on there. But if you're watching this video in September of 2024, let's fast forward 6 months from now, and you're thinking, do I take the 009 or the 008? Which one do I take? Keep in mind the 008 may be going away relatively shortly. You might want to take the 009. So this may be a time limited thing. This may be dependent on when you are watching this or when you're planning to study for your certification. I would recommend you go to the CompTIA website, look at their Network Plus page, and look to see what they've currently posted. That's where they will post information about any new versions and what the dates might be for that new version. I think that's an important place to go. In fact, let's go to the CompTIA website just to see what they have there currently. I'm going to go to the certifications option. We're going to choose a lot of certs these days. Let's choose Network Plus, CompTIA Network Plus. You can download the exam guide. Those are the objectives. The overview, the exam details is what we want. It's just further down the page, or we can click the link at the top to go to the exam details. On the exam details, they have that the current version is the N10-008. It was launched on September 15th of 2021, and here's what it involves. All the things that we've already talked about today is what's in here. So they don't have anything on their webpage today as we sit here on March the 20th of 2024, no 009 to think of. So why would you wait for anything? Currently, it doesn't even exist. There's no mention of it. It's not real. And only until they post some information is it real. Now, I can tell you there's probably going to be some information posted in a month or two. We'll get that eventually. But as we sit here today, don't worry about that. Don't dwell on that. That's not important. That's for somebody else in the future to worry about, not for us. We want to get the certification today. We need to keep doing what we're doing. We need to keep studying what we're studying. There's a whole world of technology waiting for us. We need to open that next door and get down the road with whatever's next on our list of things. And now's the time to finish up your N10-008, earn your Network Plus, get that job, and continue to move up in your technology career. Well, I think that's a great place to stop our efforts. I know that we kind of went over our time a little bit today, but at least that gives you an idea of things you can think about as you are going through your Network Plus studies. Hopefully you got something out of our Q&A in the first hour. Thank you so much for your questions in the second hour. It makes such a difference for what we are doing here. I'll also remind you that if you liked this video, we'd love it if you gave it a thumbs up. We would love it even more if you would be nice enough to subscribe to our channel. It's a great way to support what we're doing. It does help us quite a bit as we're working with our friends over on YouTube. It's something that will also get us a little bit closer to that 1 million subscriber mark, and that's going to be a lot of fun when that happens too. Want to thank everybody for joining us. Come back next week. We've got our Security Plus study group happening on Wednesday, a week from today, same time frame, 12 noon Eastern time. And of course, we have our Network Plus study group, our A Plus study groups, and more Security Plus happening next month as well. We really welcome you to come on back and join us for the next iteration of that. Come on back to see what we're doing on our next Network Plus study group. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time, next month, on our Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.